All right, so Colin has the word stored up into his heart. So this is normally the time when we read, but he's going to be doing this from just the word that he has stored up. So go ahead, Colin.
So Philippians 4:13 is, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. And when I think of that, it just gives me courage in like whatever I'm doing. If it's school, work, and just playing, if I'm trying to do something that I want to do and I don't know the courage, I'll just say in my mind, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me, and that'll help me in whatever I do.
All right, we're about to dismiss every. Before we do, just a friendly reminder that we are collecting bath tissue. Still working on that. Bath tissue for the Children's Home of Lubbock. So if you are here, which you are, we encourage you to bring bath tissue. For those of you who are online, if you would like, you can just somehow send us some funds or bring by a check, and then we'll go pick it up for you. And the more you bring, the more awkward it will be for me trying to sneak out of Walmart with 1,200 of those things. So I'll probably get mugged. So if that's your heart's desire, send in the money, and it'll be all for the children of Lubbock. So I want to encourage you to do that. So right now we are going to be dismissed for classes. And if you're a kiddo or a teacher, you can head that way now.
John 7:4. Almost have everybody out. Just a friendly reminder. If you don't like my teaching, you can always volunteer to be a teacher, and they get you a free hall pass out of this place as quick as possible. Okay, so we have been looking at the 12 apostles over the last month or so. We spent a little time in introduction and then a little time looking at Peter. And then after Peter, we talked about his brother Andrew, and then his fishing buddy James, and James's brother, who happened to, their father was Zebedee, but they were known as the sons of, okay, all right, we're doing, so Peter, Andrew, James, and John. Next came Philip. So we talked about Philip last week, and I really have enjoyed this book. I struggled with what John MacArthur said about Philip. I kind of thought he dug in a little too deep on him. I'm kind of interested in what's going to happen when he gets to Thomas, because as a general rule, like we like to make Thomas our like the little puppy that we kick, because we want to give him a hard time for doubting, and we'll get into that next week. But before we do that, I was really struggling because I didn't know two different ones. I thought I could either do Nathaniel or I could do Bartholomew, and I didn't know which one to do, so I figured I would just kind of just wing it tonight. So if you think we should talk about Nathaniel, go ahead and raise your hand. Who wants to hear about Nathaniel? Anybody? We have three. Everybody else you can leave. Okay. And how many of you want to listen about Bartholomew? Okay. So for the 8 people who raised their hand, and if you're online, I want you to know there's more than 8 people out here. But it's just the weird thing with raising hands. We're still working on that. But if you wanted to listen to about Nathaniel or Bartholomew, stay right where you are, because we're going to talk about both of them. Why are we going to talk about both of them? Because they're one and the same. So let's just do a quick little linguistic study. Anybody familiar with the word bar, B-A-R? And please, I should not have said that. I'd take all of that back. When I'm referring to the Greek, what does bar mean? Son of. And so, incidentally, there are 4 different lists in the New Testament that list the apostles. Okay? Those are found in Matthew, in Mark, in Luke, and Acts. John skipped it. You know, because John's so crazy. He's not interested in all about the list and things, and I just love the Gospel of John. But John doesn't do it. So if you look at Matthew, Mark, Luke, and Acts, those 4 different lists, they all list Nathaniel. I'm sorry, Bartholomew. But if you go to John, he exclusively uses the name Nathaniel. And you could say, well, where's the confusion here? It's quite simple. Bartholomew is just a compound bar Tomai. Bartholomew, son of Tomai, which again that would be son of Thomas, really. Greek is super interesting. I don't know enough to really tell you about it. I took enough of it where I should know, but man, it's been a long time. But believe it or not, your name, if you're in Greek, your name changes based on where it fits in the sentence and what its purpose is, right? Okay, and so that seems kind of unusual, but it has word endings. And are y'all study Latin, right? Latin, is that similar?
Yeah, that's why in Julius Caesar play, everybody knows et tu Brute.
Yes.
But his name is Brutus.
Yes. That's a perfect example.
You're talking directly to him, so you change it.
Yeah. So when he said, "E tu Brute," even you, everybody's like, "Wait, who's Brute? Is that like a cute little nickname?" No, that was because the word ending was different, and such is the case when we talk about Greek. And so I won't waste any more of your time except to say Nathaniel, Bartholomew, exact same person. So, do we know a lot about Nathaniel / Bartholomew other than he is the son of Tomai or Thomas? We really know very little. Karen, you're right. Just so little about him. In fact, it almost all comes down to this very first interaction where Nathaniel is going to first hear about Jesus, and then he's going to be introduced and speak with Jesus. And that's really all we know. But I really think there's a lot of good insight that we can get from John chapter 1. And that's where we're going to be spending the majority of our time. So if you have your Bibles, go ahead and turn there. That's where we're going to be introduced to Thomas, Thomas, son of Thomas, Nathaniel, Bartholomew, and he is going to be introduced to Jesus. So what exactly do we know about him? And I'm going to let you start off and kind of help me out. I'm going to go ahead and read. We're going to pick up starting in verse 43. Okay, and I want to back up a little bit because there's some other individual in play. Does anybody know who Nathaniel's buddy is? Philip. That's right. Phil and Nate, they were close friends. As far as we know, they were really tight. In fact, in the same way that Peter and Andrew were almost always mentioned together, and James and John were almost always mentioned together, you have Nathaniel and Philip. They're almost always mentioned together. And so even here, it should come as no surprise that where there's one, the other is not far away. So, the next day, Jesus decided to leave for Galilee. Finding Philip, he said to him, "Follow me." Philip, like Andrew and Peter, was from the town of Bethsaida. Philip found Nathanael and told him, "We have found the one Moses wrote about in the law, and about whom the prophets also wrote, Jesus of Nazareth, the son of Joseph." Now stop there. I don't want you to read ahead because I know you want to read ahead because it's going to get really exciting. But before we do, what information can we glean from this small little passage right here? Bless you. Bless you. Okay, he's Jewish. Okay, he's from Nazareth. No, he's not from Nazareth. He's not from Nazareth. You caught me off that one. He's from.
He said,
Yeah. Where is he from? Bethsaida. That's where we know Philip is from, and they're close friends. We know that he's going to be from Cana. Okay, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. Okay, so we know a little bit more. What else do we know about him based on the dialogue that takes place? And right now it's just a monologue because he hasn't responded. Okay, Jesus went looking for them. Okay, we talked about this last week. This is very unique because prior to this, they had gone to look for Jesus, but Jesus seems to want to find Philip. He wants to search him out. And then once Philip realizes who it is, what does he do? He goes straight line for his friend Nathaniel. And what does he say to Nathaniel? Okay.
Because he's specific in how he gives Jesus credibility.
Yeah. How does he give credibility? He talks about the fact that he says, this is the one Moses wrote about in the law. Now, just on the surface, that may not seem very important, but it's really important if you take into account that Nathaniel would have no idea who this Moses is talking about if he wasn't familiar with the law and what Moses had in fact said. And so I think this gives a lot more credence and more weight to him as a student of the law than what we would think off firsthand. Okay, so what are some things he could have said? Just think about this. Let's think, just erase all of this. We're not in New Testament times, but just think about this. You just met Jesus, right? You just met the Son of God. You run back to tell your friend who you just met. How might you describe them?
Very interesting.
I met a really interesting person outside of Walmart today. You have got to come see him. How else might you describe Jesus? If you just met them and you're going back to a friend, what might you say?
You got to see this to believe it.
You got to see this to believe it. And that's exactly what he's going to do. He's going to say in a minute, he's going to say, you got to come and see. But how might you describe Jesus? If you're telling somebody, I just saw Jesus.
I'll have to point him out to you.
I'll have to point him out to you. You know, we introduce Jesus and we talk about Jesus, especially when we get in this type of setting, in a very different way than I think Philip introduced him to Nathaniel as he described him. I think sometimes we get really wrapped up in what we think Jesus is going to do for us. I mean, that comes across in some of the songs that we sing. It comes across sometimes in our prayers. And please don't misunderstand me. I'm not saying your prayers. I'm saying our prayers, my prayers. That sometimes I really get caught up in what Jesus can do for me. And in fact, sometimes when I'm talking to people, when I'm trying to describe who Jesus is, sometimes I'm really quick to talk about what He will do for you and how He will change your life. But that's not what Philip is doing here. Philip doesn't say, hey, come meet the guy that's going to make your life better. Do you notice he doesn't say that? He doesn't say, hey, come meet the guy that's going to fix your marriage. He doesn't say, come see this guy who can make you happy and make life all better. Notice that this is not about, let me introduce you to a guy and what he can do for you. Instead, it's, let me introduce you to this man named Jesus. And by the way, this is the one that Moses wrote about. Okay, so one more question. Why was it a big deal that he would say, this is the one Moses wrote about?
Nathaniel was skeptical.
Nathaniel was skeptical.
I would imagine.
He is. He's going to be.
Philip was probably going, just He didn't mark them.
Yeah, like this, I mean, he's throwing out the M word. He's talking about Moses here. This is a big deal. I just think there's plenty of reason to believe, and Terry talked a little bit about this a minute ago. I think they knew what Moses had said. I think they had studied it. I think they really were seekers of God, and they were looking for the Messiah. Now, there's some other stuff that we're going to be looking at in a minute, but I almost just want to, put it neutral, pull the parking brake, and just hang out here for a little bit. Because what does this say about these two guys that they're sitting around reading the Old Testament and they are anxious about a coming Messiah? I'm anxious about a lot of things. I'm excited about a lot of things. I'm nervous, and I don't consider myself an overly anxious person, but there's some things that can get me really excited. I'm excited that maybe, I don't want to go political, but I don't mean this to be political. But I'm excited. I heard just the other day that we're a few percentage points, 15% of New Mexicans. If we get 15 more percent vaccinated, I don't have to wear a mask anymore. And that's not political, that's selfish. Like I'm ready for a point where like we can all be safe and we can get, and I keep saying going back to normal, but man, that makes me really excited. I'm excited about Friday. You may not be excited about Friday. I'm really excited about Friday. Friday is the last day that my son is going to be in school. He is graduating from high school in a couple weeks. Friday is his last day. I'm really excited about that. If he makes it through Friday, it means that in some way we have successfully got him through his education thus far. Right? That's kind of a big deal. It's scary. Brett and I were just talking. Man, I can't believe it happened. Like I can remember holding him. I'm really excited about that. I'm really excited about May 11th. May 11th, my daughter's going to be playing in a JV golf tournament here in town. And my wife is taking the day off from school, and I'm taking the day off, and we're going to go walk around. And as a family, we're just going to watch her play golf. I'm really excited about that. There are a lot of different things that I'm excited about. These guys were excited about reading some really, really old material and about the potential that a Messiah could be coming. Now, there had been some rising excitement about a Messiah coming for a while, but it just seemed like more than ever, people were anxious for a Messiah. But it wasn't about what this guy's going to do for me. It wasn't about how he's going to put the Israelites back on top or how we're going to kick out the Romans. It was, he is coming just like Moses talked about. He's the one. And it's hard. I'm not going to pretend it's easy. It is hard. We are several thousand years now removed from when Jesus was living, not quite 2,000. I mean, when he was alive, but not at his death. But it's been a long time. I don't know about you, but I don't get giddy with anticipation. I'm not like the people in Thessalonica who thought, he's coming any day, like I'm just going to hang out here for a while. But there is some anticipation in his voice. Okay, so we already know that he has been reading, he understands his scriptures, and that's why when Philip comes to him and says, hey, Nathaniel, let me tell you who I saw, and he describes him, I think that's really important. But listen to this, I just love this. He says, we have found the one Moses wrote about in the law and about whom the prophets also wrote, Jesus of Nazareth, the son of Joseph. And this is where the brakes squeal. This is where, the record scratches like, wait, hang on. That ain't right. And Lee, you knew it was going to come. It had to happen. Okay? What good comes out of Jowl? I mean, but here's the funny thing. Here's what's really interesting. Nathanael didn't come from Nazareth. Nathanael came from Cana. Okay. Cana is to Nazareth as Jowl is to Hobbs. Okay? And so it would almost be like us coming from Jowl and somebody saying, hey, I want you to meet this guy. He's the Son of God. He comes from Hobbs. That's really what it's more like. Because if you look geographically, Nazareth there's not much in it. In fact, if you go back to the Old Testament, we don't have hardly anything about it. But even as it sat there were a few major crossroads that came across. It wasn't a booming metropolis. It was a Hobbs, right? But here we have Nathanael from Podunk, Cana, wink, wink, Jowl, who's saying, what good can come out of Hobbs? That's what he was saying. Now, I don't think I'm reading too much into this. I think it's fair to say that on some level that Nathanael has some prejudice. He has decided that nothing good can come out of Nazareth. Now, disclaimer, we're all prejudiced. Like the person who thinks they're not prejudiced is simply ignorant and they're not self-aware. Now, I'm not saying that like you're prejudiced in the sense that you're prejudiced against certain people and you want to hurt them all, but we all have lenses through which we see life. We all do. You grew up with two parents. You grew up with a single family. You grew up in a foster home. You're going to have prejudice to that. You grew up in a small town. You grew up in a big city. You grew up in the desert wasteland of Hobbs. You're going to see life a certain way. Okay? There have been books that have been written over such minute details is the birth order in which you came. If you were born as the oldest, if you were born as the youngest, and heaven forbid any of you were ever the middle child, okay, you see life through a different set of lenses. Okay? And so it's not entirely all negative to say you have prejudice. We all do. We all see life through our own colored lenses. Right? But it seems here that Nathanael has a bit of a problem. And we kind of joke about, nothing good comes from Nazareth. But I don't think that was quite the joke that we make it out to be. I honestly think that Nathanael was struggling with nothing good can come from Nazareth. Now, why do I think that? Well, there's a couple of reasons why I feel that way. And some of them, let's go back to let's go to John chapter 7. Let's flip over a few pages. Let me make sure I'm referencing. Okay, we're going to go verse 45, okay, of John chapter 7. Finally, the temple guards went back to the chief priests and Pharisees, who asked them, why didn't you bring him in? This is after they had seen Christ, and this is kind of this, they'd seen Jesus, and they're trying to figure out who he was. And we're going to be reintroduced to somebody we saw back in chapter 3. They said, no one ever spoke this way, the way this man does, the guards declared. They said, you mean he has deceived you also? The Pharisees retorted. Has any of the rulers or of the Pharisees believed in him? No, but this mob that knows nothing of the law, there is a curse on them. Then we have Nicodemus, who had gone to Jesus earlier and who was one of their own number, asked, does our law condemn anyone without first hearing him to find out what he is doing? Now listen to this. They replied, are you from Galilee too? Look into it, and you will find that a prophet does not come out of Galilee. Okay, so Galilee, what is Galilee? Okay, it's a region up in the north. Remember, we have Galilee up north. Okay, we're going to have, of course, the Sea of Galilee. I'm going to use your side. Is going to be on the east side. The Jordan River is going to come down. Right in the middle is what? Samaria. And then we go down even further, and what do we have? What region? Judea. And in Judea is what? Jerusalem. Right? And so here are these guys, these Pharisees, they're in Jerusalem, they're in the big city, they're where all things happen and where all the intellectuals are, and they say nothing good comes from that area. And it was a lot funnier when I was in Texas. It's less funny that I'm in New Mexico, but I always like to say, like, that's like Oklahoma up there. Like, what good comes out of that area? But they're not the only ones. Because if we go back and look at Luke chapter 4, we're going to hear some of the same thing. So, Jesus is in his hometown, okay? He's in Nazareth. Now, don't read the title, because that gives it away, and then I don't have anything to talk about for the next 5 minutes. So just don't read it. We're going to pick up in verse 28. Then he rolled the scroll back up, he gave it to the attendant, and he sat down. The eyes of everyone in the synagogue were fastened on him, and he began by saying to them, "Today this scripture is fulfilled in your hearing." All spoke well of him and were amazed at the gracious words that came from his lips. Now let's stop there right now. Like, they're saying really good things about him. But then listen to this. It's going to turn terrible just in a few seconds. Somebody says, "Isn't this Joseph's son?" They asked. "Oh, you mean our Joseph? You mean the carpenter Joseph?" They thought that this rabbi, this Jesus who was teaching so well, they thought surely he's well educated. He came down from Jerusalem, and or I guess he came up from Jerusalem. They were more concerned about elevation, so he came down from Jerusalem, and now he's here to speak to us. And then somebody says, "I recognize that kid. Isn't that Joseph's son?" And Jesus said to them, "Surely you will quote this proverb to me, 'Physician, heal yourself.' Do you do here in your hometown what we have heard that you did in Capernaum? I tell you the truth," he continued, "no prophet is accepted in his hometown. I assure you that there are many widows in Israel in Elijah's time, when the sky was shut for 3.5 years and there was a severe famine throughout the land. Yet Elijah was not sent to any of them, but to a widow in Zarephath in the region of Sidon. And there were many in Israel with leprosy in the time of Elisha the prophet, yet not one of them was cleansed, only Naaman the Syrian." Okay, does anybody get what he just said? He just said, in Elijah's time, none of the widows believed in him. And in Elisha's time, none of the people believed in him. He says, "You guys aren't going to believe me." And he was right. Listen to this. All the people in the synagogue were furious when they heard this. Listen to this. This is the beginning of Jesus' ministry. He's in his hometown. They got up, drove him out of the town, and took him to the brow of the hill on which the town was built in order to throw him down off the cliff. Think about this. I think this is really, really important for us to know. This is not just his hometown is a bunch of angry people. Well, you could say, well, we could go to Jerusalem, we could talk to the Pharisees, and you could see that they're just a bunch of snobs and a bunch of hypocrites, and they couldn't believe that any good could come out of Galilee, much less Nazareth. But this is an issue that Jesus is going to face over and over and over again in his ministry. He is going to fight against prejudice of coming from the region of Galilee and born in a little town or raised in the town of Nazareth. Right? And so I don't think it's an accident that Jesus chose Nathanael. I think Jesus was very intentional in wanting to choose one of his followers to be someone who would struggle with prejudice. Now here's the beautiful thing about it all. I don't want to read that. That would be cheating. I don't want to go ahead. So let's go back to John. We're in John chapter 1. Already Philip has come to Nathanael and said, hey, we found the one that Moses spoke about. He's from Nazareth. And it's also mentioned, by the way, I don't think it's of great significance, but he says, this is Jesus of Nazareth, the son of Joseph. I don't think anybody is suggesting that there's something great about that other than the fact that in a lot of ways that would have just been almost like a surname. That he was saying this is Jesus Bar Joseph. Okay, it's how we got Nathaniel Bartholomew. Right? He was just identifying not him necessarily with Joseph as much as he was as this is Jesus. He's from Nazareth and he's got a dad named Joseph. So, but then he says, Nazareth, can anything good come from there? Nathanael asked. And I love this. Philip says, come and see. He's not going to argue with Nathanael. He's going to say, come and see. And I think this is two things. One, I think it speaks to who Jesus was and how impressive he was. But I also think it speaks to Nathanael in the fact that he is a reasonable, logical person. And Philip felt pretty confident that he says, hey, if you just come see Jesus, I think you just might change your mind. When Jesus saw Nathanael approaching, he said of him, here is a true Israelite in whom there is nothing false. Now again, this is a place where I would just love to say, honestly, I can't hardly imagine a better thing to hear Jesus say to me. I mean, this is right up there with well done, good and faithful servant. But that's not at the end of his life. This is when they first meet. And I think this is really special because Nathanael doesn't seem to struggle with believing who Jesus is quite like some of the other 12 would. Some of them, several years later, they're still trying to figure out. In fact, as we talked about last week, there was Philip. And remember, Philip kind of seemed to have an issue with fully understanding who Jesus was. Because he's going to talk about, I'm going to go to the Father. And Lynn, we talked about this last week after class. What did Philip say? He said, show me the Father. So we'll know. And Jesus was like, oh, how long have you been with me? Why haven't you figured this out? So here we have Philip, who's the one who's going to take Nathanael to Jesus. Nathanael figures it out from the very get-go. He sees and instantly believes. It's just fantastic. He says, here's a true Israelite. In him there's nothing is false. He says, how do you know me? What do you think he's asking? You don't know me. I think he's almost saying like, yeah, you're just trying to flatter me. You're just trying to flatter me. But listen to this. Jesus answered, I saw you while you were still under the fig tree before Philip called you. Okay, now it's getting really interesting. And Nathanael is about to just lay out exactly who he believes Jesus is. And he's going to have figured out when the first time that he saw him, when Philip and Thomas and some of the others were still struggling, even towards the end of Jesus' earthly ministry. But it took something as simple as, yeah, I saw you under the fig tree. Why do you think that gave away so much? Why do you think he would be so impressed? Why would Jesus use that? Couldn't he have said any other thing? Why would he say, I saw that you were under a tree? Oh, wow, that's great. I mean, not that there were a lot of trees. They probably have as many trees there as we have here, honestly. So it probably, if somebody said, Larry, I saw you under a tree, you've been, wow, that's pretty impressive. There's only 3 in town, so that's saying something, right? Why was this a big deal? Okay, there's a couple of things. One, what kind of tree was it? A fig tree. And there's a lot of allusions that we could get from that. But here's one thing we know about a fig tree. Okay, a fig tree is all mangled up at the bottom. It has all the trunk is big and twist, and then it comes out. They usually only grow to a height of about 15 feet. But oftentimes they're as wide as 20 to 25 feet. Okay, so it's 15 feet high, and the branches come out and then come down a little bit. This is a terrible, but just imagine it more like a mushroom, right? I mean, it's not like a pine tree, okay? If you're under a pine tree, somebody can see you under that pine tree from 40 miles away. Right. I mean, as far as they can see. But on a fig tree, the branches would come down low, and a lot of times this was used as a place of shade. Because remember, they lived in very humble houses. Oftentimes it was one room. It might be where they would cook. It might be where they would keep their animals. It might be where several generations would congregate at one time. And so if you wanted to get away, a lot of times a fig tree was a place to go. Because you could go and basically kind of crawl under the branches. In fact, they talk about the fig tree was a really great place for people to go and meditate and pray. Now think about this for a minute. What do you suppose? I mean, we're just guessing here. But what do you suppose Nathaniel might have been doing while he's under that fig tree? I think he was praying. I think he was studying. I think he was meditating. I think the anticipation of a Messiah was so great. He was so anxious. He studied the Old Testament. He was waiting for a Messiah to come. And I don't think it was just the fact that Jesus says, hey, I saw you at this location. I think more than anything else, he was saying, hey, I know what you were doing. I mean, who's to say that it's not Nathaniel who's underneath that fig tree and he's praying and he's saying, Lord, we just send your Messiah. And he would get this. Lynn, you had your hand up?
I think maybe he was thinking about Jacob's dream. I mean, why else would Jesus go to that verse to repeat some of Jacob's dream?
Yeah.
It's one thing to know that I was under a tree daydreaming, but then when you can tell me exactly what I was daydreaming, that's just not.
Yeah.
I don't have any proof of that. It seems coincident that he quoted right now. I can't remember where that's found. That's part of Jacob's dream, isn't it?
Yeah. Do you remember when Jacob had a dream? What's the one thing that he saw? Jacob's ladder. Okay, he saw his ladder and the angels were coming up and down. And this is going to be really neat. I was going to save this till the end, but since Lynn spoiled it all and ruined it, well, then I guess we'll just go ahead and go there and we'll backtrack in just a minute. Shame on you for knowing your Old Testament, Lynn Blackman. He's going to say this, I tell you the truth, you shall see heaven open up and the angels of God ascending and descending on the Son of Man. And here's what's really special, because he's saying, listen to this, what Jacob saw was a ladder and the angels going up and down, but now Jesus is going to make this proclamation. He says, I am the ladder. I'm the one in which the angels will go up and down. And all of that was predicated on the proclamation that Nathanael made. Now, let's go back and look at this. Okay, so Jesus says, I saw you while you were under the fig tree before Philip called you. Then Nathanael declared, Rabbi, you are the Son of God. You are the King of Israel. Like, that is a bold, bold statement. That's okay. Burnell Cleary. Don't ever apologize for playing the Bible audio. You can't apologize for that. In fact, I just encourage you to do it wherever you go. Just when you're in line at the post office, just hit and just let everybody enjoy Genesis chapter 1 with you. Okay, so here's something that's really special about the Gospel of John. Does anybody know one of the things John is really pushing for? How about we go back and look at 1 verse 1. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. One of the things that John is trying to say over and over and over again in his gospel is referencing that Jesus is the Son of God. This is his whole purpose. And so that's one of the things why it was so important for John to include this in his gospel, is because Nathan is going to make this proclamation very early on. Right? Now, if you go back and look, you can see in several different places. Well, I don't want to go there. I really want to go there, but we'll later on read John 20. Just put that in your mental note. Read John 20 and read about what happens at the death of Jesus, because this again is going to underscore John's importance of this is Jesus, Son of God. Right? Okay, so Jesus is going to tell Nathanael, he says, I saw you under the fig tree. And Nathanael is going to say, Rabbi, you are the Son of God. You are the King of Israel. And then Jesus says, you believe because I told you I saw you under the fig tree. You shall see greater things than that. Okay, so we kind of have an idea of what we know about Nathanael / Bartholomew, or Nathanael Bartholomew, right? But there's one thing that I really like about learning about Nathanael. Well, there's really three things. The first one is he anticipated the Messiah. Just spoiler alert, Jesus is coming again. Jesus was prophesied as to coming, and there were people, Anna, Simeon, they anticipated his arrival, and when he came, they were ecstatic. They could not wait. He had finally come. They had waited for this moment. I think it was Simeon who said, now I can die. Was that Simeon who said that? Maybe I'm getting confused with Anna. Said they saw baby Jesus and said, like, take me away, like, this is what I've been waiting for. The anticipation. How often do you get giddy about the second coming of Jesus? How often do you talk about, man, I can't wait till he comes. This is going to be so exciting. And are we living in such a way that we just can't wait for him to come? The second thing I love about Nathanael is the fact that God chose a man who was prejudiced. And we all are on some levels. But God said, trust my son. believe me when I say that something good can come out of Nazareth. And he's going to take, just like Peter was, all of them were rough around the edges. I always pick on Peter, and I should. But just like Jesus picked smelly fishermen, one of them who hardly said anything, another one who couldn't stop talking, two of them who were called the sons of thunder because they were always looking for somebody to rain fire down on, right? And then, of course, we could talk about Philip, but you have all these guys that have these issues, and Jesus chose them. Jesus chose Nathanael, and if Jesus can use Nathanael, who's struggling with prejudice, don't you think he can use us? And what's beautiful about this is that he's going to overcome his prejudice. Because his first thought was, nothing good can come out of Nazareth. And a few steps later, I don't know how long it took to get him back, but by the time they get back to Jesus and Jesus says, I saw you, he goes from being, there's no way you could be, nothing good could come out of Nazareth, till he says, you are the Son of God, the King of Israel. And I just love how meeting Jesus changed everything. And of course, the last thing I love is that he is willing to go all in. And we don't really hear anything else about Philip individually throughout the Gospels. Nathanael throughout the Gospels. But we get this proclamation. He has made up his mind from the very beginning, and he seems to stick with it. And in fact, he will. And Nathanael, like all the others, excluding Judas, of course, who took his own life, and John, because he died on Patmos, the other 10 all became martyrs. What I want to read what it says by tradition. It says, that's what we know about Nathanael. Early church records suggest that he ministered in Persia and India and took the gospel as far as Armenia. There is no reliable record of how he died. One tradition says, listen to this, that he was tied up in a sack and thrown into the sea. Another tradition said he was crucified. By all accounts, he was martyred like all the other apostles except for John. He was faithful to the end. He wasn't certain that it was Jesus, that Jesus was Son of God, but once he was convinced, he never seemed to waver. And even to the very end, when Peter's saying, hey, let's all go fishing, there's Nathanael, he's still around too. He's going to end up on the beach as well, as Jesus is going to feed them in a little bit. And so as you look at your own life and you have your own struggles and questions and even your own prejudice, remember that God is big enough and His love is strong enough that He can remove those and make you a powerful minister for the Lord. So let's close out in prayer and we'll be dismissed. Father God, I just thank you for once again giving us an opportunity to look at another one of your apostles. And Lord, we're just reminded that each one of us has failures of our own, and yet in the same way that you could use those 12 2,000 years ago, some that came from places like Cana, you can use us. And so Lord, I just pray that we will believe that with our heart, that there are some people who we're going to come in contact with in the next few days. They're hurting, they're angry, they're broken, they're scared, they're lost. They might not even heard of you, and they may not have ever even seen anyone who would act like you. And so, Lord, I just pray that we will be that witness to them, that we will show this world who you are despite our faults and our shortcomings. Lord, thank you again for your Son, Jesus Christ, and the price He paid for all of us. It's in His name that I pray. Amen. Thank you all for being here. We look forward to seeing you on Sunday at 9 a.m. Don't forget your bath tissue. You're dismissed.